welcome back to Kardec Radio for Teens. As of course I'm sure we all know by now that we've been reading through the Spirit's book for months now together, reading it and really breaking it apart so that we can really understand what was trying to be said in this book and what's the message that was trying to be across. And that's what we try to do here at Kardec Radio for Teens. We're trying to make it more understandable and more relatable to us in our lives. So last week we left off on question 222, and that question, it wasn't really a question. It wasn't like Allan Kardec asking a question and the spirits answering. It was more of just paragraphs of the spirits just talking, and Allan Kardec and just kind of putting together the thoughts that we were going over before. So it's not really a question, but it's just an explanation. So it's just paragraphs. So we kind of left off in the middle of that. So if you missed last week, I highly suggest you go back and listen to it first, because it'll make a lot more sense, because we're going to start off right like halfway in the middle of that question. But just to sum it up so everyone's kind of on the same page, the parts that we read of this question 222, just a really quick summary of what it was saying how spiritists, they didn't create reincarnation or any of these concepts. These concepts, they've been around since the beginning of time. We can see that the Egyptians knew about reincarnation and various different beliefs throughout history in different time periods. They've believed in it. So Spiritism we didn't just create something out of thin air. It was there in different forms since the beginning of time. So that's what they were kind of stressing in this part. So they were just kind of renewing the concepts and introducing it in a little different way, but the basic principles are the same that have been around already. So let's continue on with that question. And then they say, "But for now, let us examine the issue at hand from another angle, apart from any revelations by the spirits. We shall put them aside for the moment, and assume that this theory did not come from them at all. Let us even assume that we have never even pondered it together with the spirits. Let us, instead, place ourselves in a neutral position for the time being, and accept the same degree of likelihood of truth for both the hypothesis of the plurality of corporeal existences and that of a single existence. And let us see towards which side reason and our own interest will take us." So, like we were saying before, they were trying to prove us, okay, no, spirits didn't just create this. We're not inventing something new. This has been around for a long time. So they're saying, right now, just to pretend, let's pretend that we don't know what the spirits think about this. We didn't even talk to the spirits. None of this happened. We're just some random person, and we're just gonna think about this in our own, like, common sense. And we're gonna think about the hypothesis of plurality of worlds, so more corporeal existences, so reincarnation, and a single existence. So we're gonna see which side makes more sense to us, and just kind of forget about the spirits right now and what they said and what we know to be true, but let's just think about it as anyone in the whole planet looking at this. So then they continue. "Some individuals reject the idea of reincarnation for simple reasons that is inconvenient to them. They declare that one existence is quite enough, and that they have no desire to recommence a similar one. We even know persons who become infuriated at the simple thought of returning to the earth. We would ask them whether God ought to ask for their advice and consult their wishes in setting the universe in order. One of two possibilities applies. Either reincarnation is a fact, or it is not." So let's just split that part up real quick. So right there, they're saying that some people, they don't believe in reincarnation because they don't want to believe that's true. They don't want to come back. So if they don't believe in reincarnation, then they don't believe that they're going to come back, that they're going to have to start off where they left off. People think that, oh, I've gone through so much this life, I don't want to come back. So they just kind of ignore reincarnation because they just don't want it to be true. And then they continue. One of two possibilities apply. Either reincarnation is a fact or it is not. If it is useless for these individuals to oppose it, and they will have to undergo it without God asking them for their permission. Opposing it would be the same as a sick man saying, I already suffered too much today. I don't want to suffer any more tomorrow. No matter how unwilling he may be, he will not suffer any less tomorrow or in the days that follow until he is cured. Likewise, if those individuals must live again corporeally, they will do so. They will reincarnate. So here they're saying, so there's only two options. Reincarnation exists or it doesn't. So it's a fact or it's not. So if it is a fact, then these people, it does them no good to say, oh, it's not true, oh, it's not true, oh, it's not true. Because if it's true, then them denying it isn't going to do anything. Even if, no matter how much they deny it, they're still going to have to come back. They're still going to have to continue their trials. And they put a good example here saying about how if it was a sick man, if you're sick and you're saying, oh no, I'm so terrible today, I'm not going to be terrible tomorrow. Because they think, oh, my sickness is just going to go away. It's not going to go away until you're better. So you can't just because you say, oh, I don't want to be sick tomorrow, I don't want to be sick tomorrow, that isn't going to magically fix it. You have to get the medicine and do the proper treatment to get better first. And then they continue. They will protest in vain, like a child who does not want to go to school, or a criminal condemned to prison, because they will have to reincarnate nevertheless. Objections of this type are too childish to deserve a more serious examination. However, in order to reassure such persons, we will state that the Spiritist doctrine of reincarnation is not as terrible as they might think, and that if they were to study it in depth, they would realize that they have nothing to fear. They would understand that each new existence depends on themselves, that it will be happy or unhappy according to what they are doing in their present one. That, from this life onward, if they improve themselves to a certain degree, they will never have to fear of falling back into the swamp. So they started off here by saying, okay, they're going to protest in vain. So protesting in vain means they're going to be protesting, but it's not going to be doing them any good. So it's like a child saying that they don't want to go to school. No matter how much you complain and protest that you don't want to go to school, you're going to go to school. Or like they said, a criminal who has to go to prison. No matter what, you're going to have to go to prison. So no matter what, they're going to have to reincarnate. If they're trying to protest it, trying to fight it off, or if they're accepting it, they're still going to have to do it. But they're saying that one way that people might get over this and might start to open up to the idea of reincarnation is if they just studied a little bit more. Because if they studied like we are right now, they would see that you're not going to go backwards. Everything that you learn, you're only going to get better. It's not going to get worse from where you are right now. So you're going to keep improving, keep getting better. So if they knew that, because most people, like we were saying, they're scared of suffering more. But as we go on, we're going to suffer less and less because we're going to keep improving and getting better. So if they knew that, maybe they wouldn't be so terrified and against the idea of reincarnation. And then they keep going. We will presume that we are addressing persons who believe in some kind of future after death, rather than those who believe that only nothingness awaits them, or those who wish to immerse their soul into the universal whole without preserving their individuality, like drops of rain falling into the ocean. So here they're saying that now we're going to be talking about people who they believe in something after death, whether it's heaven and hell, and we're not talking about those people who just ignore that anything's going to happen at all. They just think it's going to be nothing, or that we're all going to be like little drops of rain that go back into the ocean and you can't tell any difference. So right now let's talk about those who they believe in some kind of future after death. So then they continue. If you believe in any kind of future at all, you certainly do not suppose that it will be the same for all. because that would imply that doing good during one's life would not matter in the end. So here they're saying that people who believe that, okay, there's something more after death, these people, they know that there's something different for each person after death, because if it was all the same, let's say like the concept of heaven, if we were all going to go to heaven no matter who you were, then what's the point of doing anything right? So people want to make sure that there's a difference between people who do stuff right and people who do stuff wrong. So if they're thinking about something after death, a future after death, then they know that it's somehow different for every person. So then the spirits continue. In other words, why restrain ourselves? Why not satisfy all our passions, all our desires, even at the expense of others, if our future will be neither better nor worse for it? If, on the other hand, you believe that the future will be happier or less happy according to one does in a life, you do not desire to make it as happy as possible because it will have implications for all eternity? Do you, by any chance, fancy yourself as being one of the most perfect creatures who has ever walked the earth, and thus have an immediate right to the bliss of the elect? I would not think so. So here they're saying that if you know that your future after death, if it depends on how good you are here, then won't you try and be good so you can be happy afterwards? Or won't you do everything to try and make you have a happy afterlife instead of miserable? Then they continue. Thus, without having to consider yourself among the reprobate, you must admit that there are those who deserve more than you, and who have the right to a better situation. Well then, mentally place yourself for a moment in that middle position, which, as you admit, you occupy at the moment, and imagine that someone says, you suffer, you are not as happy as you could be, whereas there are others all around you who seem to enjoy perfect happiness. Would you like to trade your situation for theirs? Of course I would, you reply, but what do I have to do? They answered, almost nothing. Simply start over what you have done badly and try to do it better. Would you hesitate to accept this proposition, even if it costs you many lifetimes of trials? Let us make a more prosaic comparison. So here they made a really good comparison. Let's talk about this one before we move on. And they said, so let's think that we're in the middle. We know that, okay, we're not the worst person ever. There's people who are worse than us, but there's also people who are better than us. We're not perfect. We know we're not perfect. So there are people who are better than us and a little happier than us. So if you're there in the middle and you're seeing that people are happier than you, wouldn't you want to trade that? So they're saying, if someone said, do you want to trade your situation for theirs? And all you had to do was try your situations again, like your lives is what they're saying. So try again, and whatever you did wrong, do it better. And then when you do it better, you'll be at that happier state. You'll be past where you are right now. So they're saying, would you do that? Would you continue? And that's kind of showing us that if people saw this kind of option, then they'd be a little bit more open to reincarnation, because that's what reincarnation is. Because we're in that middle. We know that, okay, we're not the worst. There's people worse than us, but we're not at perfection yet. We're not perfect. So we want to be at perfection because we don't want to suffer as much. So if we go back, if we repeat, if we reincarnate, and we learn more and we do better, then we'll get happier and happier, and we'll get to those better states of being. And then they give another example. And they say, suppose you were to say to a man who, although not in extreme poverty, is going through hard times due to his precarious resources, there is a huge fortune for you to enjoy. However, you must work hard for it for exactly 1 minute. If he were the laziest being on earth, he would not hesitate to say, I'm willing to work for 1 minute, 2 minutes, an hour, a whole day if necessary. What difference would that make if my life will end up in abundance? Well then, what is the duration of one corporeal life when compared to eternity? Less than a minute, less than a second. So here in this example, they're showing you that, let's talk about, instead of lacking in happiness or in fulfillment, let's talk about something physical, like money. So there's a man who he's very, very poor. He's not, like they said, he's not at extreme poverty, but he's very poor. He's going through a rough time. So if someone went to him and said, okay, there's a lot of money that you could get right now, but you have to work really, really hard for 1 minute. And even if he was the laziest person ever, he would still say, okay, if I'm gonna be able to be happy and to have money and not to be struggling like I am right now, okay, I'll work for a minute, I'll even work for a whole day. Even if he was the laziest person, right? Who wouldn't want to do that? And then that's what they're comparing it now to eternity. So let's think about that 1 minute as one reincarnation. One reincarnation that we can work really hard and we'll overcome some of those struggles that we're going through right now, that we want to overcome, that we'll become happier. So all it takes is working really hard in one life. Or, well, it's going to continue, but if we work really hard in one life, then we're going to get closer and closer to happiness a lot faster. And this life has to be, try and make it this life. Because some people think, oh, well, I'm already 15, so that's too late to start this life to be good. I'll wait for the next life. No, try and do it now. Work hard now so that your next life will be better and you'll be working your way up to perfection, and it'll be a lot faster if you're working hard for this minute now instead of working really, really slowly for a long, long time. So then they continue. We sometimes hear of this sort of reasoning. God, who is supremely good, would not impose on us the obligation to recommend another series of misfortunes and tribulations. Do they, by any chance, believe that God would show more kindness in condemning people to eternal suffering because of a few moments of error than in granting them a means to repair their wrongs? So what they're saying here is that some people think, okay, but if God is so kind and good, then why would he make us go through this misery, this horrible life again? But that doesn't make sense, because they think, okay, if you're horrible right now, if you make one mistake, you're going to suffer and you're going to be in so-called hell forever. Or he's giving you the chance to do better so you don't have to go through that. You can improve yourself. So if we think about it that way, it changes a lot. It's not that he's making us come back to this horrible life again and again, but he's giving us a chance to fix our mistakes so that we don't have to suffer forever. And then they continue. 2 manufacturers each had a worker who aspired to partnership. But on one particular workday, both workers were unproductive and deserved to be fired. One of the manufacturers actually fired his worker despite his pleas, and since he was unable to obtain any other employment, he died in poverty. The other, however, said to his worker, "You have wasted a whole day, so you owe me compensation. You have performed badly, so you owe me reparation. However, I will let you start over tomorrow. If you perform well, I will keep you, and you will be able to continue aspiring to the higher positions, I promise you." So, what they're trying to say here is that in one situation, the man just fired him. After one mistake, after one bad day, he was fired, and then his whole life kind of went super downhill. So that's like suffering, like we're saying. So, which one sounds more fair? Just firing him, saying, oh, you did one mistake, that's it, you're going to go to hell, you're going to suffer, or giving him another chance, say, okay, you made a mistake, but tomorrow I'm giving you another chance to do better. So then they continue. Is it necessary to ask which of the two manufacturers was more humane? Then would God, who is clemency himself, be more inflexible than a human? There is something poignant in the thought that our fate is sealed forever because of a few years of trial, and considering the fact that all our efforts are insufficient for reaching perfection while on earth, the opposite idea is immensely consoling since it does not deprive us of hope. So what they're saying here is that if just two humans can make those decisions like that, one that's right and one that's wrong, don't you think that, and if we clearly look at that and know what's right and wrong, don't you think God, who is the supreme, don't you think that he knows this just as much as we do and more? So they continue. Therefore, without deciding either for or against the plurality of existences, and without favoring one hypothesis over the other, we will simply state that if the choice could be made, no one would prefer a sentence that could not be appealed. So what they're saying here is that if we take away all of our spiritist knowledge, if we're looking at these basic examples that don't have to do anything with spiritism, if we're just looking at these basic examples, we all clearly would rather have the chance to try again and learn from our mistakes than just sit there and suffer forever. A philosopher once said that if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent one for the contentment of humankind. The same could be said of the plurality of existences. As we stated previously, God does not ask for our permission, nor does God consult our preferences. Things either are or they are not. Based on such considerations, let us see on which side the odds might lie. Let us consider the matter from another point of view, still omitting the teaching of spirits, and examine the issues solely as a philosophical endeavor. So let's go over that last piece a bit. They said, so a philosopher once said that if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent one for the contentment of humankind. So what does this mean? This means that people, we sort of behave, we follow rules when we have something to believe in, when we believe in something beyond life. And we're not talking, you remember for this part we were pretending like we don't know anything about spiritism right now. We're just thinking as anyone in this whole world with common sense could think. Knowing that there's something more than just this life, knowing that there's God, knowing that there's an afterlife of some sort, that kind of makes us behave because, okay, even if we go to the hell and heaven situation, we know that, okay, we need to be good so we can have a better afterlife. Or even just people think that, oh, so maybe there's millions of beliefs, but you need to be good so that you're in a better place when you're maybe sleeping eternally or whatever it is that people believe. But they believe that you have to be good because if you're bad, something bad's going to happen. So imagine if no one believes in God and no one believes in any sort of afterlife. So then everyone could just do whatever they want because nothing was going to be wrong. They could do bad things, not follow any rules, and everyone would just die the same. So it's saying that if there wasn't a God, we would have to invent one because it makes us behave and follow rules and be good and improve ourselves. So that's what they're saying here. And then they're going to go on and now talk about, if we're looking at it, we're still pretending that we don't know spiritism. We're still pretending like we don't know about the spirits. We don't know all we thought about. Don't actually forget it though, but pretend that we put it to the side, and then now we're going to examine it as a philosophical endeavor. So as like a philosopher, we're going to see it. But we'll leave that for next time because this section does go on for a long time, this one question. So next time we'll go over looking at it in a more philosophical way, but still kind of leaving spiritism to the side. But before we leave off today, I'd like to read our daily book of positive quotations for today, April 11th. Holding back criticism. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Jesus Christ. It's tempting to criticize others. Sometimes we're just gossiping for the fun, and sometimes we are truly offended by what others have said or done. But we hate to be criticized ourselves. Sure, there may be reasons for others to criticize us. But how could they be so insensitive, so heartless? Don't they realize that we're just ordinary folks trying to do our best? So we're not perfect. So what? I can be quick to criticize. If there's one thing I could do to be a better person, it would be to be as generous about the flaws and mistakes of others as I am about my own. I'm Bia. Thank you all for listening. This has been Kardec Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.